The river kept the same expression, quiet, heavy, listening. A bicycle crossed the alley, slow enough to hear the rain. Even the footsteps in this city seem too tired to complain. French cafes beside the roadside, tiny fans turning above, coffee cups and old jazz records, people speaking softly of love. Nobody hurries in Luang Prabang, not the river, not the sky. Time dissolves beside the Mekong, like smoke that slowly passes by. I watched the sunset from the harbor, orange melting into gray. Tourists leaned against the railings, like they forgot the date. The trumpet sounded far away, from somewhere near the old hotel. A melody too slow for radio, but perfect for this spell. Nobody asked me where I'm going, nobody cared why I stayed. Maybe that's the hidden beauty of cities beginning to fade. Warm air resting on my shoulders, lantern shadows on the wall. Some nights don't need excitement, they simply need to fall. Nobody hurries in Luang Prabang, even loneliness moves slow. The Mekong carries every silence further than we'll ever know. The river barely seemed moving beneath the fading orange sky, like itself had stopped breathing, just to let the evening pass by. A trumpet echoed from the harbor, soft and tired in the heat. French tourists leaned against the railings, watching shadows flood the street. I ordered another cold beer without checking what time it was. Nobody in Luang Prabang ever seemed to care, because the river moves slower than my thoughts, heavy beneath the moon. And somehow every quiet moment always disappears too soon. Old cafés beside the Mekong, still glowing after rain. Lantern colors shaking softly across the darkened lane. A woman closed the wooden shutters near the old Colonial square. The jazz piano from upstairs drifted slowly through the air. Some cities make you run faster, this one teaches you to wait, to sit beside unfinished feelings without needing to escape. The river moves slower than my thoughts, warm wind touching my skin. And somewhere inside the silence, I finally became still again. Warm air resting on the river, long after the sun was gone. The Mekong moved beneath the darkness, slow and endlessly calm. A cold glass sweating on the table beside a fading cigarette. magical evening that makes people quietly forget. French voices near the balcony, soft laughter drifting low, white linen moving through lantern light, like a scene from long ago. Warm air, cold glass, quiet piano, floating softly through the blue. Luang Prabang after midnight felt unreal and true. The jazz came from an old hotel, muted trumpet wrapped in rain, a melody too tired for radio, but beautiful all the same. Scooters cross the empty street without urgency or speed. Nobody here chased tomorrow, they simply let it breathe. I watch reflections on the water disappear beneath the black. Some feelings don't need answers, they just slowly fade back. Warm air, cold glass, quiet piano, the river breathing through the night, and somewhere beyond the Mekong, everything finally felt light. The hotel stood beside the river, old yellow walls beneath the rain, wooden shutters slightly broken, holding decades of quiet pain. A ceiling fan turns slowly above the empty lounge. Someone played a worn-out piano without needing a crowd. French perfume in the hallway, mixed with coffee and old wood. The kind of place where loneliness almost started feeling good. Soft jazz from the old French hotel, floating gently through the night. Muted trumpet near the window while the Mekong lost its light. traveler speaking low downstairs, maps folded beside red wine. Nobody seemed connected to clocks or deadlines. The bartender polished glasses like he had nowhere to go, and outside the river drifted, heavy, dark and slow. I sat alone beneath the balcony, watching lantern colors move. Luang Prabang after sunset had its own invisible groove. Some cities try too hard to shine, this one simply breathes, warm air resting on your shoulders like tropical autumn leaves. Soft jazz from the old French hotel, echoing across the blue. And somewhere inside that silence, I disappeared a little too. The evening arrived without warning. Soft orange fading from the sky. The Mekong carried shadows slowly, like it had all night to decide. I found a small table near the water, an old fan turning overhead. Someone poured wine in the corner, while trumpet melodies spread. French voices drifting through the darkness, warm laughter moving with the heat. Scooters crossing narrow alleys, slow enough to hear the street. One quiet beer beside the river, cold glass against my hand. Luang Prabang felt half forgotten, like a dream that didn't end. The jazz came from an open doorway, lazy piano, soft and blue. Nobody in this city hurried, not the river, not the moon. A waiter stacked the empty bottles without looking at the clock. Lantern reflections touched the water near the silent wooden dock. Maybe some places are beautiful because they never try too hard. They simply leave the lights on for tired people after dark. One quiet beer beside the river, the air smelled warm and sweet. And somewhere beyond the Mekong, I stopped feeling through the darkness, like tiny stars beneath the rain. The Mekong carried every color, then erased them once again. A slow piano from the riverside leaked softly through the heat. Muted trumpet near the harbor, following the sleepy street. French travelers drinking quietly under yellow balcony lights. Their laughter faded into jazz, somewhere deep inside the night. Lantern reflections on Mekong water, shaking gently with the tide. Some feelings never disappear, they simply learn to hide. I walk beside the river slowly, past cafés closing one by one. Nobody seemed afraid of silence or another day being done. Old colonial walls still glowing, warm against the tropical blue. Luang Prabang felt half imagined, like a memory passing through. The bartender turned the music lower as midnight filled the air. Only the river kept moving, like it had nowhere else to care. Lantern reflections on Mekong water, floating farther into black. And somewhere beyond the darkness, I stopped wanting to go back. Midnight settled on the river, like velvet falling from the sky. The Mekong carried silent lanterns, without asking where or why. A lounge bar near the harbor, still glowing warm and cold. Muted trumpet through old speakers, soft enough to feel old. French travelers half whispering over wine and cigarette smoke, their laughter fading into jazz. Every time the piano spoke, Luang Prabang midnight lounge, slow shadows on the wall. Some nights don't need excitement, they simply need to fall. The bartender moved without hurry, polishing another glass. Outside, the scooters drifted slowly through streets too calm to last. Colonial windows stayed half open, warm air filling every room. And somewhere beyond the river, temple bells dissolved in blue. I sat alone beside the balcony, watching darkness touch the shore. Some cities quietly heal you without explaining what for. Luang Prabang midnight lounge, the trumpet low and deep, and somewhere beneath the tropical silence, I finally fell asleep. The final boat was leaving slowly through the dark Mekong tonight. Lanterns trembling on the water, tiny pieces of floating light. A jazz trio near the cabin played softer than before. Muted trumpet, tired piano echoing across the shore. French travelers sipping wine, like the night would never end. White linen moving in warm wind, old conversations without meaning. I stayed near the railing quietly, watching the city disappear. Luang Prabang behind the river, fading slowly year by year. The last cruise before midnight, no destination left to find. Some journeys only happen inside a tired mind. The bartender cleaned the glasses without needing to speak. The rhythm of this river made every silence feel unique. Somewhere beyond the darkness, temple bells dissolved in rain, and the Mekong carried memory further than a train. Nobody hurried toward tomorrow, nobody asked the hour. The city moved like old jazz vinyl, slowly losing power. The last cruise before midnight, warm wind against my skin, and for one quiet moment, I didn't need to belong anywhere again. The boat arrived before sunset, slow waves touching the shore. A saxophone leaked from somewhere behind an old wooden door. French travelers dressed in linen, laughing softly with red wine. The evening air was heavy, like the city was stretching time. I ordered one cold beer slowly and watched the Mekong turn gold. The river carried old stories nobody needed to be told. A woman lit a cigarette, the smoke disappeared in the heat. Scooters rolled through quiet alleys without rhythm, without speed. French wine near the river dock, tiny lights above the street. Somewhere between the jazz and silence, I forgot who I used jazz floating through the blue. The Mekong kept moving quietly, like it already knew. The sunset melted into copper across the heavy Mekong flow. The river moved like sleeping smoke, too slow for time to know. A jazz trumpet from the harbor curled softly through the heat. French travelers dressed in white linen, watching shadows fill the street. The boat drifted without purpose, no hurry in the engine sound. Luang Prabang after evening felt detached from every town. Sunset over the slowest river, orange fading into blue. Some places don't try to impress you, they quietly change you. Café near the Riverside played piano through the rain. The melody sounded unfinished, but somehow stayed the same. Lanterns trembled on the water, tiny lights against the black. The Mekong carried every silence without asking anything back. I sat alone beside the railing, cold beer warming in my hand, listening to distant laughter from people who seem to belong. Sunset over the slowest river, warm wind touching my face. And for one endless tropical evening, I disappeared into the space. The shutters open slowly as evening touched the town. Golden light through old French windows, falling gently down. The Mekong looked half asleep beyond the narrow street. Scooters rolled like whispers through the fading heat. Somewhere from an upstairs balcony, a jazz record played alone. Soft trumpet wrapped in static, like a memory without a home. Colonial windows at dusk, watching strangers drift away. Luang Prabang moved so slowly, it almost refused the day. A waiter wiped the empty tables without needing to rush. Wine glasses catching lantern light inside the growing hush. I sat beside the river wall with nowhere left to be. The sky turned dark blue over water and silence covered me. French travelers dressed in linen, speaking softly near the bar, like they belong to another century. Very close, but still far. The piano kept repeating the same tired midnight phrase, and somehow that small repetition made beauty from the haze. Colonial windows at dusk, warm lights glowing through the rain. Some cities never heal you, they simply soften pain. Tonight the Mekong carried every unfinished thought into the slow tropical darkness, where nothing needed to be solved. Rain disappeared an hour ago, but the street still held the glow. Lantern colors on wet pavement, moving slowly down below. The Mekong carried broken reflections, orange lights across the stream, like the river was remembering every unfinished dream. A quiet jazz bar near the harbor played trumpets soft and low. French voices mixed with thunder from somewhere far beyond the road. I walked alone beneath the balconies, old colonial walls turned gold. The night air felt like velvet, warm and slightly cold. Mekong lights after rain shimmering through the blue. Some cities hold your loneliness like they were designed for you. A woman closed the cafe slowly, stacking glasses one by one. Nobody here seemed frightened of another day being done. Scooters drifted through the darkness without urgency or speed. Luang Prabang never promised more than silence people need. The piano sounded distant, like music from another life, soft enough to disappear before becoming too bright. Mekong lights after rain, floating quietly through time. And somewhere beside the river, I finally stopped asking why. The cafe lights were still awake long after the market closed. Tiny lanterns near the doorway, flickering against the road. A slow jazz record kept spinning somewhere near the back wall. Muted trumpet wrapped in static, soft enough to barely call. French travelers drinking espresso, maps scattered on the table. The ceiling fan turned lazily, like it had nowhere else to go. A small cafe near the night market, warm air drifting through the blue. Luang Prabang held the silence like it already knew. Scooters passed without urgency, rainwater shining on the street. The Mekong carried distant reflections beneath the tropical heat. I sat alone beside the window, watching shadows come and go. Some cities speak too loudly, this one whispered low. The waiter cleaned the empty glasses without looking at the time, and the piano kept repeating the same unfinished line. A small cafe near the night market, soft jazz floating after dark, and somewhere between the trumpet and river, I quietly lost my heart. The night market closed slowly, lanterns fading one by one, warm air resting on the pavement long after the heat was gone. A jazz melody crossed the alley, soft enough to disappear. Muted trumpet through an open window, like a memory staying near. Foreigners laughing somewhere behind me, glasses touching in the dark, French words floating through the evening like sparks without a mark. Beside the Mekong quietly, hands buried in my coat, watching tiny river reflections move beneath an empty boat. Nobody cared where I came from, nobody asked me to stay. Luang Prabang gave me distance in the gentlest possible way. The old colonial buildings held shadows inside the walls, and every slow cafe piano sounded tired after all. Some places make you feel important, Deck 7 was almost silent. Only the river made a sound. The sunset burned above the Mekong, while darkness slowly gathered around. French couples leaning together, photographs fading in gold. Someone whispered in another language, a story already told. I stood beside the railing with nowhere special to be, like a stranger accidentally invited into somebody else's memory. The jazz inside the cruise bar floated softly through the air, muted trumpet and lazy piano, like smoke disappearing somewhere. The outsider on deck 7, watching lights along the shore. Every city has a loneliness, some just hide it more. Shadows in the heat. A warm wind touched the water, then vanished into the street. Nobody noticed my silence, nobody asked me to stay, but somehow Luang Prabang made emptiness feel okay. The boat moved slower than thinking, no destination in sight. Only jazz, river reflections, and another endless tropical night. The outsider on deck 7, half lost between dream and blue. The Mekong carried everybody, even people passing through. The river carried midnight slowly beneath the faded silver moon. A jazz piano from the rooftop played a tired, empty tune. French voices somewhere in the distance, drifting softly through the heat. Wine glasses and slow conversations floating down the quiet street. I walk beside the Mekong, without a map or destination. Some places don't need meaning, they simply become sensations. Too far from home to feel lonely, too lost to feel afraid. Luang Prabang after sunset turns silence into shade. The old colonial balconies, still glowing pale and gold, like memories from another century, too beautiful to hold. A waiter stacked the empty chairs outside the Riverside bar. Nobody hurried toward tomorrow, nobody traveled far. The trumpet sounded half asleep, soft against the humid air, and every tired lantern shadow seemed perfectly placed there. Too far from home to feel lonely, the river breathing slow and deep, and somewhere beneath the jazz and darkness, I forgot what I used to keep. Orange skies above the river, burning softly into night. The Mekong moved without a reason, like it was following light. Small boats drifting in the distance, engines humming low and thin, a jazz piano from the rooftop, floating gently through the wind. French tourists drinking slowly, white shirts glowing in the dark. Someone laughing near the harbor, like evening had just begun to start. I walked beside the water, past old colonial walls, lantern colors on the pavement, echoes through forgotten halls. Slow boats beneath orange skies, nobody rushing anywhere. Luang Prabang held the silence like a prayer inside the air. A trumpet cried for a moment, then disappeared into blue. The city never tried too hard. That's what made it feel true. The river smelled like rain and wood, warm stone after heat, tiny cafes full of shadows and tired travelers on the street. I sat alone with cold beer, watching darkness slowly rise. Some places don't ask questions, they simply let you hide. Slow boats beneath orange skies, night arriving, soft and deep. The Mekong carried all my thoughts somewhere I could never keep. The night arrived without a sound, warm air hanging over stone, lantern shadows cross the river, and somehow I felt unknown. A jazz piano from upstairs played softly through the wall. Muted trumpet near the harbor, like it barely cared at all. French travelers filled the terrace, red wine glowing under light. Their laughter drifted through the darkness and disappeared into the night. Nobody asked my name tonight. Nobody asked where I've been. Luang Prabang kept its distance and quietly let me Hurries roll beside the Mekong, slow enough to hear the rain. Old colonial windows glowing, pale yellow through the haze. The bartender wiped the counter without looking at the clock. Some cities move toward tomorrow, this one simply stops. I watch the river carry lanterns into places I can't know, and for a moment every memory started moving slow. Nobody asked my name tonight. The trumpet fading into blue, and somewhere beneath the tropical silence I became invisible too. The river moved slowly tonight, like it had nowhere to go. Golden light on the Mekong water, and strangers laughing soft and low. French voices drifting through the air, wine glasses touching in the dark. I sat alone beside the window, watching evening leave its mark. Nobody asked where I came from. Nobody asked why I stayed in Luang Prabang after sunset. Even loneliness looked beautiful that way. The boat kept floating without hurry. The sky turned amber, then blue, and somewhere between the river and silence, I slowly disappeared too. Balconies glowing, warm lights falling on the street, scooters passing without urgency. Everything here moved incomplete. Maybe this city understands people who arrive half broken inside, because the Mekong never rushes flourishes. It simply carries the night. Tonight I don't need an answer. I just need this fading view. A slow jazz playing by the river, and a city that forgets me too. The final lantern disappeared beyond the darkened river bend. The jazz bar closed behind me without needing an ending. Warm wind resting on the water, old shutters trembling in blue. Luang Prabang after midnight felt quieter than truth. A trumpet echoed from far away, then vanished into rain. Like every unfinished feeling, returning once again. The Mekong keeps flowing anyway, no matter who arrives or leaves. Some cities don't belong to people, they belong to memories. French travelers heading home slowly, white shirts glowing in the dark, wine glasses left on empty tables, tiny shadows without marks. I walk beside the silent harbor, stopped asking.